Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Splash City Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Hartman, and this is episode 2. In today's episode, I'll be talking about the massive change going on in Dinkytown as the Minnesota Golden Gophers welcome new head coach Niko Medved. We'll talk a little bit about the new roster and some of the changes going on over there and what Gopher fans can expect maybe from this year's team. And then we're also going to take a look at the recruiting and transfer landscape here in the upper Midwest. We'll talk about Minnesota and the Big Ten. We'll talk about some local high school kids, where they've committed. And we'll also talk about some new coaches in the Big Ten at Iowa City and in Bloomington, Indiana, that might shake things up a little bit in the Big Ten. And then lastly, we're going to close with a deep dive on Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve and her legacy that she has developed over the past 16 seasons. She's got 4 NBA championships, an Olympic gold medal as Team USA's head coach. And we're just going to talk about where she ranks in the list of great basketball coaches, not only in the WNBA, but also in professional basketball here in the United States. So grab a beverage, settle in, let's talk some hoops. This is the Splash City Basketball Podcast. All right, let's dive right into what's going on over at Williams Arena on the campus of the University of Minnesota, and with the hiring of Niko Medved as the new Golden Gophers head men's basketball coach. This hire happened back in March, and honestly, it feels like exactly what this program needs. There's been a lot of turnover. No one's really had a lot of consistent, sustained success, and Niko checks a lot of those boxes. So if you don't know Niko Medved's story, it's a homecoming of sorts. He is from Roseville. He's a suburb of Minneapolis. He was a University of Minnesota graduate. He started his coaching under Clem Haskins in the late 90s before moving on to more full-time roles elsewhere. But this isn't just another coaching hire, I don't believe, especially not one that Mark Coyle has made in his past 2 at men's basketball, where he brought in somebody. Richard Pitino had 1 year of head coaching experience. Ben Johnson had 0 years of head coaching experience. And if there's anything we've learned, or I've learned from that, even Lindsay Whalen, if you look at the women's program, it's really tough to win at the Big Ten level when you haven't been a head coach and built a program. So that's been one of my biggest gripes. Niko has built programs. He has had sustained success. He's gone in those recruiting battles. He's gone in conference play year after year where coaches scheme up against your system, and he's proven he can win. So he's gone through that. He's a proven winner. He's done it at multiple programs, multiple levels through the years. And so I'm really excited. I think most Gopher fans probably are like, this finally feels like maybe a guy who can turn around this program and get it to some level of success, as long as we're not delusional about what success means at Minnesota. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Niko Medved started at Furman as a head coach from 2013 to 2017. He improved wins every year he was there before moving on to Drake. He was there for 1 season, took them from 7 wins the prior year to 17. And Drake will be a common theme in this episode of the podcast. You'll hear that school come up numerous times. And then most recently, he's been at Colorado State, where he coached the Rams for 7 years, built a great resume there, multiple NCAA tournaments, including 3 of the last 4 years. He's had 25 plus wins in 3 of the last 4 years. He's put 2 or 3 guys in the NBA. So he is definitely a program builder. He's not only won games, he's won at a high level, he's won tournament games, but he's also putting guys in the NBA. In this day and age, they used to feel like, hey, we got to give the guy 3 or 4 years to get this figured out. Now that's not the case. You look at what happened at Louisville last year, where that was an immediate turnaround. The NIL and transfer portal has really changed how people can turn programs around, how quickly they can do that. And I think the expectations at Minnesota are going to be, not as low maybe as they have in years past with Ben Johnson as head coach. All right, so let's talk about that annual tradition that everyone loves, massive roster turnover in college basketball. So a new coach comes in, especially a program that has struggled, you expect a lot of changes. But what's happening with the Gophers, and we'll talk about later, Iowa, is just a full rebuild. So some of the key departures from last year's Gophers team include Dawson Garcia, Mike Mitchell has gone, Frank Mitchell has transferred to St. Bonnie's, and got some of that Wojo money. Caden Betts transferred to Montana. Lukai Patterson graduated. Femi Odekale, portal. Parker Fox graduation. K-Fan radio personality and a Twin Cities Pro-Am coach is where I saw him this summer. So who does that leave from last year's team? Well, it leaves sophomore guard, Isaac Asama. He's the sole returning player that contributed anything meaningful last year. He had moments that were good as a freshman. He had moments that weren't so good. So classic freshman season from Isaac. Redshirt freshman forward Grayson Grove out of Alexandria and junior Eric Reeder out of Woodbury are the only other returners from last year's team. All three of them are from Minnesota. So Niko came in and got those guys to recommit. But Reeder and Grove haven't played any meaningful time on the Williams Arena floor. And so that leaves Asama as the only contributing returner. So who's coming in? Well, Niko got to work quickly, as you'd expect in the transfer portal. But he also was able to keep one guy that Ben Johnson, previous coach Ben Johnson, had signed as a freshman coming in, as Kai Shinholster, who's a 6'5" wing. I don't have super high expectations necessarily for him as far as playing time. I think that's why you have to go to the portal and get some of these older guys. It's a big difference between a junior, senior versus a freshman in college basketball. And you even see top blue blood programs like Kentucky, who are heavily relying on veteran transfers these days to compete. So one of the big question marks was with Niko Medved coming in and CSU being one bucket away from the Sweet 16 last year is who was coming with him? Who of those CSU players could he get to come with? And the one player that came with Niko from Colorado State was junior power forward Jalen Crocker Johnson, who's 6'8". He's going to provide some toughness and rebounding, physicality in the Big Ten. He played in all 36 games at CSU, and his stats won't wow you. 9 points a game, 4 rebounds a game. He played about 21 minutes, so just about half the game for them. But I think some of us Gopher fans had high hopes on Kyan Evans, who ended up at North Carolina. So that was a lot to ask, and when you're competing with a blue blood program like North Carolina, to get Kyan Evans, but Minnesota was able to bring in one player from Colorado State with Niko Medved. Now, another player that is exciting to get, probably the biggest get in the transfer portal for Niko, is 6'2" junior guard Chancey Willis Jr. out of Western Michigan. So he led the MAC in scoring, averaging nearly 17 points a game. Previously, he was at a D2 school, Saginaw Valley State. And a junior college before that. So you'll see this a lot in today's episode as well. A lot of guys with multiple stops, right? Like some of it's they're continuing to get better, they're moving up a level. Some of it's just not the right fit. What I like to see out of Willis is just take some of that pressure off Asama. And I honestly think that could be a pretty good backcourt, right? You got 6'2" Willis who can score the ball. He's a pretty good point guard. He can distribute. Asama's a nice combo guard. He can bring the ball up in a jam. He can help out, relieve some pressure. He's a physical defender. We saw even as a freshman, he was helping defend some of the better, more physical guards in the Big Ten last year. So I think between those two, that's going to be a pretty nice backcourt combination for Niko Medved in year number one. Another guard added to the mix this year is a veteran with some scoring ability, 6'4" senior Langston Reynolds. Reynolds was first team All Big Sky and was ranked 20th in the nation in field goal percentage, actually. He shot 59% from the field. Good rebounding guard, another good rebounding guard to go with Asama. So if he plays alongside of him, you'll see a couple of really strong rebounding guards against some of these bigger teams in the Big Ten that we'll talk about later. But historically, Illinois has big guards. Purdue has big guards. So, that's going to be really important for Niko in his first year to have those kind of guards. Now, a couple other guys that I'm excited about. Junior transfer, Bobby Durkin. He's going to be providing some scoring punch, 6'7" forward. He was a good shooter at Davidson, which, everyone should know that program. Steph Curry, they value shooting at Davidson. He also averaged nearly 6 rebounds a game there and shot a pretty strong 35% from 3. So he actually dropped 28 at Rhode Island last year. So he does have that ability to put the ball in the hoop. And I looked it up. He had at least 2 made threes in 24 of their 33 games last season. So that's Bobby Durkin, 6'7" forward, going to help with some shooting and some length on the wing. Likewise, really intriguing player for me is Cade Tyson. So Tyson, his brother was actually a star at Clemson, and he plays for the Denver Nuggets now. Hunter Tyson. Cade, similar size, has a lot of promise. He was at Belmont for a couple years. He was the conference freshman of the year. He was second team all conference his sophomore year when he shot 46.5% from three. He parlayed that actually into a spot at UNC last year, but he only played 8 minutes a game. So very limited playing time last year. And honestly, on a team that, if you watched Carolina at all last year, they weren't that great of a team. So it's a little surprising to me he didn't get more time. Now that could be a red flag that maybe he couldn't play at that ACC level. It could be something to do with the fit or what have you. But again, I expect him to contribute. I think he's going to be a key player for the Gophers this year. And I think, as a competitor, you struggle a year or don't get as much time as you think you deserve. You want to show up. So I expect Cade Tyson to be a pretty big impact player for the Gophers this year. Another high major transfer to land in Dinkytown is Chance Stevens, who comes over from Maryland. Only played 7 games. Not quite sure how he's going to fit in. He did play in 28 of 31 games his freshman year at Loyola Marymount. So we'll see where he fits in the rotation as well. Looking at the final big impact transfer from guards and wings is B.J. Omat. B.J. Omat is a Minnesota native. He's out of Mankato East. He was an absolute stud at North Dakota in the Summit League for 2 years, where he was the top scorer. He was all Summit first team. He transferred to California last year, coincidentally with former Gopher Joshua Ola Joseph. But he was sidelined most of the year with a wrist injury. So he's 6'8". He's long. He can score multiple ways. He did score in double digits in 3 of his 4 games at Cal before he got hurt. So for whatever that's worth, there's more scoring punch. So I think what you're seeing from Niko is he wants length and he wants shooting. And I think that's definitely what, he went out and got in the transfer portal. So these guys are more shooters, probably a little bit of 3-and-D look from some of these guys, but they have length to switch on the 3s and 4s down to maybe even 2s. And they can put the ball in the basket. So it's just going to be a matter of who can break that paint, as Chris Finch of the Timberwolves says, and who can break down a defense to get guys open looks. But judging by how Niko's put this roster together, there's going to be a lot more shooting on this team this year. Now let's move on to some of the bigs that Niko Medved has brought in so far in the transfer portal. Understanding the previous 3 guys, Tyson, Omat, and Durkin, all 6'7", 6'8", so we'll be able to switch a little bit onto the 4s when needed. But there are some elite big men in the Big Ten. And so who's going to take on that challenge for the Gophers defensively? Let's start with Robert Vihola, 6'8", 265 pounds, senior out of San Jose State. Medved is familiar with him. He has gone up against him in the Mountain West. Vihola started all 31 games last year for Tim Miles at San Jose State. So he averaged 7.5 points, 7.5 rebounds. He ranked 4th in the Mountain West in blocks. If he can provide 7 and 7 in the Big Ten, I think Gopher fans would be thrilled. I think that's a win if you're Niko Medved. There's going to be some big time players down low. Trey Kaufman-Wren. Illinois has got a couple of 7-footers. So that's going to be key. So we talked about Jalen Crocker-Johnson. We talked about Vihola. Those are like the known commodities down low. But an intriguing name for me is Nehemiah Turner. Huge body, 6'10", 270 pounds. He's only a sophomore. Played last year at Central Arkansas. I caught a little bit of their ASUN tournament game against Stetson. Over the last 2 months, he averaged 17 points a game, including a 37, 11, and 11 rebounds in that game against Stetson. So maybe I'm biased from watching that one game, but he made a substantial jump, and the numbers bear that out from start to finish last year. So if he makes another jump like that this year, I mean, that's a formidable low post performer for Niko Medved. And I think with the other 2 guys kind of being more of that dirty work, lunch pail, rebounding, defense, they're going to need some scoring down low. And Turner might be the guy to bring that energy for Niko Medved in his first year. So for what it's worth, 247 Sports has Minnesota ranked 9th in the Big Ten for the transfer portal. So right in the middle, and I think, Gopher fans can be pretty happy about that. And like I said earlier, the key is they got more shooting. They got a deeper squad, more guys that have played at this level. And I think with more shooting, it's really going to open up the floor more. Gophers only shot 32% from three last year. I would expect that to be above 35%, which is historically where Niko's teams end up. And as anybody who watched them also knows, free throw shooting was an issue at times. So I expect improvements there as well. Now, how much they get there, that could be a little bit of a difference compared to last year. But I think from what I've seen on this roster, it looks improved. Maybe not as glamorous. Dawson Garcia was able to get buckets when he needed to. He was kind of an all Big Ten level player at times. And so, when they get into a crunch, who's going to be the person to take that shot? Is it Willis? Is it Asama? Is it Omat? Like who's that going to be? So that's kind of this initial part of the season, probably what they're working on right now. But later this fall, I'll do a full breakdown, probably right before teams start opening their schedules up, and just take a look at the Big Ten, and we'll break down how we think the Gophers are going to finish in that. All right, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about recruiting and the transfer portal and look around the Big Ten a little bit. We're about a month away from meaningful basketball being played, but I do want to preface this portion of the show with the fact that I am not a huge recruiting ranking person. I do not live and breathe by 5-star, 4-star, this, that. I don't obsess over that. I prefer kind of following the process and the development of these players. Basketball to me is as much about effort and tenacity and team fit and systems as it is about pure talent and what you see in an AAU court. But that being said, let's start with some local recruiting news. A big thing that's been talked about for years is locking the borders down at Minnesota, and whoever the coach is, whether it's Richard Pitino or Ben Johnson most recently, it's, you got to keep your in-state kids. We've seen a lot of kids leave, whether it's Wisconsin, Gonzaga, Duke. The reality is the best players in the state are probably going to go to bigger schools, and that's just the way it is. I've always maintained that the Minnesota Gopher coach probably needs to keep 2 or 3 of the top 5, 6 guys in the state every year. Outside of that, it's gravy, right? If you can get a Jalen Suggs to stay home, that would be game-changing, but that's also probably not reality. So far, next year's senior class, the class of 2026, Niko has 2 of the top 6 kids in Minnesota committed: Nolan Anderson, Wayzata, formerly Eden Prairie, and Cedric Tomes out of Eastridge. Minnesota also has a commitment from a 6'10" kid out of California. He's originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name yet. I will learn that before I get down that road. But he's going with some size. He's got a point guard of the future. And then Nolan Anderson, 6'6" wing from Wayzata. Tony Liebert actually wrote a nice article for Sports Illustrated. He focuses on the University of Minnesota. He had a nice article on the impact Medved has already had on recruiting. Highlights that this year, this year he's already got 3 commitments, which is the most in a single recruiting season since 2022, Ben Johnson's first season. So as Liebert points out, he's also got Medved, that is, also has 4-star Florida guard Joseph Hartman wrapping up an official visit, and a 4-star New York guard Lucas Murillo, who's uncommitted but did do an official visit at Minnesota. So interesting news there as Niko starts building out his roster of the future. Another Wayzata star, Christian Wiggins, really nice player, another nice wing similar to Anderson, has committed to TJ Otzelberger and Iowa State. Otzelberger actually also plucked the top player in Wisconsin senior class this year, getting Yusuf Gray out of Milwaukee. They don't rebuild in Ames, they reload. Hilton Magic also apparently applies to the recruiting trail. So Iowa State looks to be, they're leveraging their success in the last few years on the recruiting trail. A couple other players to watch if you're going out to some high school games this year. The 2027 class has a couple of really nice players: Hopkins, Ahmed Nur, the couple of wings, Ty Schlegel from Cretin-Durham Hall, and Babakar An from Maple Grove. Both of those wings, Schlegel and An, are getting interest from Minnesota. And then there's also an intriguing prospect, 6'10" center Mustafa Muhammad from South St. Paul. Maybe keep an eye on him throughout the season and his recruiting. maybe we'll get a guest on from the South St. Paul Packer podcast as well later on in the year to check in on things with the Packers. So that's just a quick look around the Twin Cities area and some of the recruiting news. All right, let's expand our scope a little bit and look beyond just Minnesota and Minnesota Golden Gophers and look around college basketball. So the Boozer brothers, Carlos Boozer's boys, ended up at Duke. Kansas actually gains the top recruit in this coming class, this year's freshman class. And actually, surprise, surprise, BYU making an appearance here and landing the number 2 player in the country, according to 247 Sports. Recent success, as I mentioned, is having a big impact on the recruiting trail, not just at Iowa State, but you can see BYU getting a number 2 player, Tennessee and Houston landing multiple top 10 recruits. So you can, and you can also, if you start looking at some of these rankings, you can understand perhaps why the Big Ten continues to have an NCAA title drought. The talent just hasn't been there. Not to say that, Purdue obviously has had great teams the last couple of years. Michigan State's had their chances in Final Fours. But when you look at some of the recruiting rankings, and like I said, I'm not a huge ranking guy, but the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC dominate the recruiting rankings. The top ranked recruit in the going to a Big 10 school this year is at number 10, but that's not even a traditional Big 10 school. That's USC and Eric Musselman. And they landed Elijah Arenas, again, dating myself, but everybody who grew up in the 90s, early 2000s basketball, Gilbert Arenas' son, yes, that's him. And then so after that, you got Michigan. They got the number 21 recruit with a Michigan-based combo guard, Trey McKinney. The next highest rated player going to a Big Ten school is actually going to the basketball powerhouse of Penn State University. Let's look at some other information around the Big Ten and the big teams. Like I said, there's some coaches changes, there's some roster turnover, there's always going to be movement, so let's just get you caught up. Iowa Hawkeyes, new hire in the Big Ten, Ben McCollum comes over from Drake, which we mentioned earlier. One season, they fell to Texas Tech. I believe it was in the round of 32. Before that, McCollum actually was at Division II Northwest Missouri State, where he won 4 national titles, which again proves the point. If you can coach at the D2 level, you can coach at the D1 level. He brings with him Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year, Bennett Sturtz, who has been with McCollum at all 3 stops. Iowa, similar to Minnesota, right? Going through the coaching change, full roster makeover. It'll be interesting to see who replenishes quicker, Niko Medved or Ben McCollum. If the Drake players that McCollum brought with him from to Iowa can prove that the Missouri Valley isn't that far from the Big Ten, and at the top, I don't think it is, McCollum might be able to turn his program around quicker. Let's go across the other border to the east and talk about Wisconsin Badgers. Familiar name to most Minnesota hoop heads, Braden Carrington actually lands in Madison as he also moves to his 3rd school in 3 years. Most listeners probably remember Carrington, the 2022 Minnesota Mr. Basketball winner. He was one of Ben Johnson's top recruits initially. Last year, he transferred to Tulsa. He will be there with redshirt sophomore Jack Janicki from White Bear Lake, who plans on taking a much larger role this year for Greg Gard's squad with some of their transfers and graduations. Nolan Winter, Lakeville North product, played alongside fellows Twin Cityans Stephen Crowell for much of last season. But I expect Winter to have a similar increase in production like we've seen from Stephen Crowell, Tyler Wall, Nate Reavers, Jared Bergeron, all these big guys that have come out of the Twin Cities who go to Wisconsin. By the time they're juniors and seniors, they're pretty darn good Big Ten players. Another name that local basketball fans might remember is Andrew Rohde. I believe that's how you say it, who took the Summit League by storm a couple years ago as a freshman playing at St. Thomas. He rode that success to a nice NIL deal at Virginia. Had some mixed results there. Started, then he came off the bench, played a lot last year. Virginia wasn't great, but he returns home to Wisconsin looking for an NCAA tourney berth, where Greg Gard's teams have been 7 of the last 9 years. And lastly, Nick Boyd, another guy, 3rd team in 3 years, guys, arrives in Madison after a season at San Diego State, played at Florida Atlantic. Going to definitely help the backcourt for the Wisconsin Badgers. All right, let's move on to one of the biggest brands in college basketball, certainly one of the biggest in the Big Ten, and that's Indiana, who hired Darian DeVries away from West Virginia last season. And of course, none other than Drake before that. I'm starting to see a trend here. If you want a job in the Big Ten, coach at Drake. Much like Bennett Sturts and Ben McCollum at Iowa, Tucker DeVries follows his dad to Indiana after following him to West Virginia prior to being at Drake. Tucker actually spent most of last year banged up at West Virginia. It was kind of unfortunate. West Virginia, I think, had a tourney team. If Tucker is healthy all year, they were close anyway, but he only played in 8 games. So look for him to have a big bounce back year. He was a 2-time Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year at Drake. Indiana's roster looks more transfer heavy than some of the other blue blood programs in the country. But again, roster turnover, you're going to see that. A lot of mid-major transfers looking for NIL money, and Indiana, I think, has quite a bit of it. So maybe not as much as Kentucky or Louisville or some of those other programs, but Indiana's got more than other Big Ten teams. So DeVries, another proven winner. Wherever he's gone, he's won games, and I don't expect that to change at Indiana, though, as we've seen in the past, Archie Miller found out that success elsewhere doesn't always mean success at Indiana. It can be a tough place to win. It can be tough to handle the boosters and some of the fans at IU. Let's also talk about Brad Underwood. I love what he is doing at Illinois. He brought in Andrej Stojakovic, and if that name sounds familiar and you weren't watching California last year, it's because Andrej Stojakovic is the son of Sacramento Kings legend Peja Stojakovic. Much like Peja, 6'7", elite scorers at all levels. He is smooth, and he's going to put up big numbers alongside senior Kylan Boswell this winter in Champaign. Underwood also lured Zvonimir Ivisic, 7'2", what I would call a stretch center from John Calipari in Arkansas. I don't know how much of it was Underwood and the coaches recruiting him versus his brother, Tomislav Ivisic, who is also at Illinois and is also over 7 feet tall, but he's only 7'1". Tomislav actually led the Illini in rebounds, blocks, and was second in scoring. So of all the teams in the Big Ten that are going to challenge Purdue, Illinois, I believe, probably has the best chance. Brad Underwood's a great coach. He's got a roster full of guys that are tough matchups, whether it's Stojakovic, whether it's the Ivisic. There's just they play a different way, and Brad has shown in the past that he can massage his roster, move guys around, and build these teams that are just tough to defend. Another Twin Cities guy on the move, Trey Holloman, who was point guard at Michigan State. This surprised me a little bit. Holloman, former Cretin-Durham Hall star, he had expanded his role, developed more playing time. I thought with Jace Richardson leaving for the NBA that Holloman would, be that senior guard, that Cassius Winston type that Tom Izzo loves. But he transfers to NC State to pair up with new head coach Will Wade. A lot of people predicting big things for the Wolfpack and Wade. Lord knows he did it at McNeese State. They had some tough teams there. He brought a couple of McNeese guys with him. If they can avoid any violations or issues, NC State might be looking for a move here. But we'll see how quickly things can gel in Raleigh. Going back to the Big Ten, Donovan Dent, former New Mexico point guard, had tremendous success under Richard Pitino in the Mountain West, transfers to UCLA. Huge get for Mick Cronin. We'll see if the travel schedule gets to Dent the way it does to Cronin. And like I mentioned, Xavier Booker, another Michigan State guy, also transferred to UCLA. So they'll be in the mix for a top 4 seed in the Big Ten, I believe, this year. Moving on to Michigan. Let's talk about Michigan. Elliot Cadeau, point guard at UNC, transfers to Michigan. He'll run the show for second-year coach Dusty May. Michigan might have the best transfer portal grade, so watch for a nice jump from them. Despite they lost Vlad Golden, they had Danny Wolf, put together a nice season. But like I mentioned, they're adding a top recruit in Trey McKinney, and that gives them that big physical guard, kind of like Ohio State's Bruce Thornton, to go with Elliot Cadeau, who's more of a ball handler, penetrator, not much of a scorer. So we'll see how Michigan shapes up this year as well. Now, as far as the Big Ten goes, we can't finish without talking about Purdue. Will Purdue finally break the Big Ten's 25-year national title drought? They are far and away the favorite in the Big Ten. They are the betting favorite in Las Vegas to win the national title. And they return All-American Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, big man Trey Kaufman-Renn. This team lost Zach Edey. They were runner-up a couple years ago. They exceeded expectations last year. They put together a good tournament run. Matt Painter is one of the best coaches in the country, no doubt about it. One of the few departures that they actually had was Wayzata native Cam Heide, who transferred to Texas. But Purdue feels like the juggernaut in the Big Ten right now. Big part of that is Braden Smith. He's been there for 4 years. They've had top teams. They were a 1 seed, got knocked out in the first round. Next year they go to the national title game. Last year they make a deep March run. The constant is Braden Smith. So going to be a lot of pressure on Purdue this year, but that is a tough team, and they are the team to beat in the Big Ten and maybe nationally. We'll see how things go. Another note on the Big Ten. If you didn't hear this, the Big Ten has already made changes to its men's basketball conference tournament. So they expanded a couple years ago with the West Coast teams. Now they have 18 teams. Last year, only 15 made the conference tournament, which to me felt odd. Like, why not make it an even number? Why not 12 or 14 or logically 16? But this year, everybody will make the conference tournament at 18. So they did add another day. So they will start their conference tournament on Tuesday and finish Sunday. So that is a lengthy conference tournament. One final note on transfers, recruiting, that section of today's podcast. Isaiah Johnson Arrigu, I think is how you say it, former Totino Grace star, once promising Miami of Florida recruit, transferred to St. Thomas. So St. Thomas tournament eligible this year. Johnny Tower has, I'm sure, his guys set on upping last year's runner-up finish in the Summit League tournament to get to the big dance this year. Johnson Arrigu transferred to Iowa mid-year last year, didn't appear in any games. Now he's in St. Paul. He's going to help christen that brand new Lee and Penny Anderson Arena on the campus of St. Thomas. They are going to be without Kendall Blue, who was a major contributor last year. I think he averaged about 12, 13 points a game. He's actually on his way to Fred Hoiberg and Nebraska. So St. Thomas news as well. If you were worried we weren't going to touch on St. Thomas, don't worry. We got Summit League talk as well. All right, last but not least, before we wrap today, I want to spend some time on someone who doesn't get nearly enough recognition for what she's accomplished, and that's Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve. Reeve, in my opinion, is the third greatest pro basketball coach in the U.S. in the last 30 years. Not WNBA coach, third greatest pro basketball coach in the last 30 years. Let me start here. 16 years, 4 WNBA championships, 4 Coach of the Year awards, Olympic gold medal, second highest win percentage, second highest postseason win percentage of any NBA, WNBA coach in the last 30 years. Who would I rank above her? Maybe Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich. After that, I don't think you can make a case for anyone else to be above her. Now, you could argue who's third. It could be close, right? Like, I'm not going to say no one else, but I'll go through the numbers, all right? Behind Phil Jackson for second highest regular season win percentage, just above Van Chancellor, also a WNBA coach. She has the second highest postseason win percentage. Championships, Phil Jackson, total has 11. Since 96, he had, I think, 8. Popovich has 5. Cheryl Reeve has 4. Eric Spoelstra, 3. Van Chancellor, 3. Playoff appearances, Phil Jackson, 20. Popovich, 22. Spoelstra, Cheryl Reeve, 14. Van Chancellor, 15. Coach of the Year awards, nobody has more than 2. Cheryl Reeve has 4. Now, a lot of people, when they talk about coaches, they want to say, oh, you had Shaq and Kobe. Oh, you had, Duncan, Ginobili, Tony Parker, whatever. That's part of coaching. Coaching is managing egos. It's finding fit. It's getting guys to buy in or women to buy in. And Cheryl Reeve does it. So, yes, her first 4 championships, she had Sylvia Fowles, Maya Moore, Lindsay Whalen, Simone Augustus, Rebecca Brunson. Those are big-time Hall of Fame level players. But this current iteration of the Lynx right now that went to the finals last year, probably should have had a championship, is top seed this year. They have Nafisha Collier, and a bunch of really good players, but probably not Hall of Famers. We'll see. You never know. Kayla McBride, great player. Lana Smith, Defensive Player of the Year. Courtney Williams, Heidemann, great roster. And that's also Cheryl Reeve, because she's also the GM, President of Basketball Operations. So this team doesn't have that star power, but man, are they fun to watch, and are they getting it done right now? As of this recording, the Lynx are up 1-0 in the semifinals against the Phoenix Mercury, who knocked off the New York Liberty. Game 1, pretty convincing, 82-69. They swept the Valkyries in a dramatic come-from-behind game, but it was 2 games. They swept them. They have the top seed. They have home court advantage through the playoffs. No matter how this season ends, I believe Cheryl Reeve has cemented her legacy. She is probably the 3rd best professional basketball coach in the U.S. in the last 30 years. The Lynx have a great following, great home court atmosphere. It's a great experience. Probably doesn't get as much attention on the national side of things as you'd think. Not the biggest market. It's not New York. It's not LA Sparks, whatever. Cheryl Reeves, she's for sure top 5 coach, professional basketball coach in the United States in the last 30 years. I don't think that's a question. I put her 3rd behind Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich. All right, let's wrap up the show. This is the 2nd episode of the Splash City Basketball Podcast. Today, we covered massive changes at the University of Minnesota men's basketball program under new coach Niko Medved. Feels like a step in the right direction. Turnarounds don't take time anymore in this era of NIL and transfer portal, but we should probably expect maybe a year or 2 of this to turn around. But, we'll see. Most preseason rankings I've seen have the Gophers in that 14 to 17 range in the Big Ten. Ben Johnson, to his credit, often exceeded very low expectations. But I could totally see the Gophers finishing in that 12 to 15 range this year in the Big Ten. Complete roster overhaul, but Medved's proven winner, probably the first program builder, proven winner that we've seen at Williams Arena on the men's basketball side since Orlando Tubby Smith. All right, we also talked about recruiting and transfers throughout Minnesota, the Upper Midwest, the Big Ten, and of course we finished on the incredible legacy of Cheryl Reeve with the Minnesota Lynx. 4 championships, 4 Coach of the Year awards, Olympic gold medal, resume that belongs in the conversation with the greatest basketball coaches of all time. Certainly in the last 30 years. Looking ahead, we are going to talk a little bit more NBA next week. I know last episode we talked a little bit about the Western Conference, but we want to dive deeper into that. We'll look at the Eastern Conference as well. The first NBA game is less than a month away, folks. I know it's football season, but basketball season is nearly here. I'll also have an update on the WNBA playoffs at that point. Who knows? We might be talking Lynx finals. We'll see where that stands. And before you go, if you are enjoying this so far, please share it with anybody who loves the game of basketball. Leave a review. And don't forget to check us out at Splash City Podcast on Instagram. Thanks for listening. This is the Splash City Basketball Podcast. Back in that bag again. Whoa, yeah. Hey. Back in that.